So, hello friends, today we are going to study another important topic, that is disaster management. So, in this single one page brief, we'll be discussing the entire topic of disaster management. So, let's begin with the definition of disaster management. So, as given in the Parks textbook, the definition goes like it is any mishap or grave occurrence in any area. The first point is mishap or any grave occurrence. Second is it will arise either from man-made causes or from the natural causes. So either man-made or natural cause. Then third, it leads to loss of or rather loss of life, destruction to property. Okay? So the second is it leads to loss of life or destruction of property. And third, last point is it is beyond the coping capacity of the affected community, or and more than 30 people are affected, then only it is suitable to call it a disaster. But there is no sure definition of it. So if you have to talk about definition, then only 4 points are important. First is it has mishap or grave occurrence in any area that is arising from a man-made or from a natural cause, and that is leading to loss of life and property, and it is beyond the coping capacity of the affected community. Second thing is hazard. So like a disaster, it is itself an event, but what is leading to that event is known as a hazard. So hazard is a dangerous substance or activity that is causing loss of life, injury, property damage, social and economic destruction, or environmental damage. So, in any way, if any substance or any activity is leading to destruction or loss of life and property, or loss of or destruction of the environment or anything of that sort, that is said to be hazard. So, hazard is a dangerous substance or activity causing loss of life, injury, property damage, and so on things. Now, what is disaster risk? Disaster risk is this hazard into the vulnerability. Okay, like a hazard you get to what is a dangerous activity, and vulnerability, who all are vulnerable, that is the disaster risk. How much risk is this population? This is the way we calculate, like what amount of a destruction this activity or this substance can cause, and what amount of population is vulnerable to it. Okay, then when we talk about the types of disaster, the types of disaster broadly are two types, man-made and then natural. If we talk about man-made, then in man-made we have biological disasters, like biological terrorist acts, warfare, then chemical warfare, biological warfare, radiological or nuclear warfare, then terrorist activity and accident. These are kinds of situations which are created by man. But if you talk about natural ones, then they can be geophysical or geological, which includes like earthquakes, okay, and then hydrological, like in geophysical only you get earthquakes and tsunamis and volcanoes. These are geophysical. When you talk about hydrological, then there you get examples of floods, okay, floods, cyclones, that you get. And when you talk about meteorological, it's excessive rainfall or extremes of temperature. And climatological, you get drought, सूखा पड़ गया. And biological again can be a epidemic. Okay, then let's come to some single liner questions on this disaster management topic, like what is the most common disease during the disaster? It's AGE. AG is acute gastroenteritis. Acute gastroenteritis. Then the most common disease is acute gastroenteritis. Then the most common outbreak is that of measles, and wherever measles is there, then the most common vitamin deficiency will be vitamin A deficiency. These three are all together only. Acute gastroenteritis is there, therefore you are getting measles infection, and measles infection you're getting the vitamin A deficiency. And then second deficiency that is most common is protein energy malnutrition. So then the vaccine for the healthcare professionals. When we talk about vaccines for the healthcare professional, that means these vaccines have to be given when before the disaster happens or before the team arrives to a disaster site. So these are vaccines that have to be given before. So these include TD, typhoid, cholera, hepatitis. But when we talk about the vaccines that have to be given post disaster, in that the first vaccine that needs to be given is measles only. Second is vitamin A drops that you will give. And the third will be rotavirus and all those which can stop the occurrence of the diarrhea. Then if we talk about the arrangements that we have to make, so the shelter that we have to make is area more than 300 square feet should be there, and water point for more than 250 people should be within 150 meters of living area. And what amount of water is needed per person? 15 liters of water is needed by per person per day. And how many per latrine for 20 people within 30 meters of area should be there. Then we come on to this disaster management cycle. So if you see this cycle can be employed in all types of disaster. So first, let's begin with, see, this has two parts. The first part is the recovery phase post disaster, and the second part is the risk reduction phase, that is before disaster. So one is post disaster phase and the other is before disaster or pre disaster phase. Okay, so if you break it from here, this is post disaster and this is pre disaster. Okay, so here you have the disaster impact occurred here. When the disaster impact occurred, you have to give response. Now, response can be of three types: primary, secondary, and tertiary. So, when you talk about the primary response is the emergency response that is to be given within 0 to 6 hours. That is the first stage and the triage. The secondary response that is given in 6 to 24 hours, uh, it is the prevalence of the communicable disease. Like after any disaster, the lots of supplies are cut. So what happens is that communicable disease starts spreading very fast. So first of all, you have to prevent those communicable disease, and that way you can bring down the death toll. So the secondary response is prevention of the communicable disease, and that can happen by improving the sanitation. And the tertiary response is the help and the aid that is provided in the form of food and shelter and clean water and blankets and chlorination and the measles vaccination. So if when you talk about the shelter, nutrition, and then chlorination, that is cleaning of the clean drinking water, and then vaccination, all this comes in tertiary response. So when you talk about response, you have first primary response, secondary response, and tertiary response. Primary response is in 0 to 6 hours. What is 0 to 6 hours? 0 to 6 hours, what you give is the first aid and the triage you do. Secondary response, that is 6 to 24 hours, prevention of communicable diseases by improving the sanitation that brings down the death toll. And tertiary is more than 24 hours, then you look for the shelter, fooding, clothing, and clean water, and then the vaccination. So all those things like roti kapda makan, all those things you look in the tertiary phase. So normally the chlorination of water is to be done at 0.5 ppm, but at this point of time you have to do 0.7 ppm. Now when we have talked about triage, so let's discuss triage in brief. Triage is a very important topic and normally asked in exam usually. So when we begin with the triage is a basic concept of segregating people on the basis of the amount of injury they have received. So those who want to, those who have, those who require immediate medical attention, like if you provide them immediate medical attention, they can be saved. Then that they have to be categorized under red category. Those who require medical attention but will not die if they don't get it in time, they are included in the yellow category. And then we talk about the green category, who require medical attention but they can wait and they won't die at all, that they come under green category. And those who are already dead or no matter what you provide to them, but they will die eventually. They are categorized under the black category, that is dead or moribund patient. Okay, so that is dead or moribund patients. So this is triage. Here the concept of first come first serve does not applies. Like if someone brings a person, say I came first, treat my patient first. No, 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 no. If you are in that category of red, then we will treat you immediately. If you come in the category of yellow, we'll take some time and treat first red people. And if you come in green category, we'll cater to you later on when we have time. And if you're in black category, we'll not treat you at all. So that is the case in triage. Then there is one more thing that is known as reverse triage. See, reverse triage is used when there is a scorch. That means there is a lack of a bed facility, like lack of facility, medical facilities you have. Here we have taken as one indicator, that is lack of beds. So this happens in cases of wars, where there is a thought that we have to save more and more people who can contribute to the war. Therefore, we do a reverse triage here, and here first of all we save what people who are in green category. Then we go for yellow, and then we go for the red. So here the reverse triage is taken. Now let's come back. In this response, we have talked about the triage. After the triage, we come on to the rehabilitation phase. So the rehabilitation phase, uh, see, rehabilitation phase, in response phase only, if you see first, we also have rescue and the first aid. We do triage, then we do tagging, and then we identify the dead. So you have done in the first primary response 0 to 6 hours, you did the rescue and the first aid. Then you triage them. Then you have tagged them like according to the category and what the need and what everything. You make a categorization, then do the tagging, and then we identify the dead. So this is being done in the emergency response. Then we come on to the rehabilitate them. uh, we have to, like after the disaster has happened, then many people are in various kind of conditions, so we have to work over them, and we have to rehabilitate them. That is the second phase. Then the third is a reconstruct phase, and then fourth we talk about the mitigation phase. So now mitigation phase is important. So in mitigation phase, what we do is we try to reduce the impact by administrative and legislative interventions. So administrative and legislative interventions we do in mitigation. So first is administrative and legislative interventions before a disaster. So we prepare the basic proper land use building codes. See, the legislation talks about getting something made, getting some work done. But it is being followed or not, it is being done or regularly intervals of time, it is functioning or not, that has to be a administrative function. So both work together in this. Then we talk about disaster preparedness. So preparedness means the measures that we take to prepare, gather resources, and build capacity and effectively cope up with the consequences. So you had a definition of disaster where it was there was loss of life and property. So capacity building has to be done for that case for the next time this does not happens. Secondly, it was like we did not were not able to cope up with the consequence, so we have to develop mechanisms that we can effectively cope up with the situation. So measures taken to prepare, gather resources, and capacity building, and effectively cope up with the consequences, that is disaster preparedness. So this is the entire disaster management cycle. In disaster preparedness, we have preparedness at four levels. So first is L0, which is that means no disaster. Then L1 at district level disaster, then state level, and then the national level. When there is a national level disaster, that is tackled by NDRF, that is the main team. So the disaster management in India is being done under the Ministry of Home Affairs, and the National Disaster Response Force acts on it. So main ministry is in Ministry of Home Affairs. But if the Depending upon the type of disaster, various other ministries also set in. Like if it is a biological disaster, then which ministry will come? Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. If it is a hydrological disaster like floods, then Ministry of Water will come. If it is a like a landslide happened, then the Ministry of Mines will come. So it depends upon the type of disaster, various ministries get involved into it. Then we have UN Disaster Risk Reduction Program, where we follow a framework known as Sendai framework. So Sendai framework, what does it does? It first understands a disaster risk. Second, it improves the disaster risk awareness. Then third, invest in disaster risk reduction and then enhance disaster preparedness. So first you understand it, then you improve it, then you invest in getting it better, and then enhance the disaster preparedness. So the various international agencies providing these assistance are WHO, UNICEF, FAO, CARE and World FP. And NDMA, that is a National Disaster Management Authority. The preparation of disaster management plans and execution of disaster management functions is done by NDMA at the national level. And who is the president of it? It is the Prime Minister. And at the same level we have, the state level we have SDM. Okay.